Hey guys, my name's Andrew Cromie and I'm here to show you a great package called Detonate. It's an explosion effects library with over 50 visual effects for all your project needs. All of the elements in this pack are shot digitally at 4K resolution. In this pack, you'll get professionally shot visual effects that you can composite in any of your short films. You'll use air, ground, and any other kind of giant explosions to enhance your projects. In this effects library, you'll be able to add industry-level visual effects to your own footage, whether you are novice or advanced, 1080p or 4K, Detonate Effects Pack is for you. Join us today as we go through and learn how to put all of these great effects into practice. All the packs are compatible with Premiere, Final Cut, and After Effects. So let's jump in and get started. So now we're going to start in Premiere, and what we want to do is I already have all of my files imported in Premiere, but all you have to do really is just go to File, Import. They'll be in your bin in here. All right, so what we're going to do is I'll just show you a couple of these. So we have a number of different elements. We have these air explosions, and you'll notice that we have two different types. We've got 60 frames per second, and we also have 120 frames per second, which is amazing because when you're trying to retime footage and you want to slow things down, you want to speed things up, it makes a big difference to have this recorded at a different frame rate. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to learn how to pull it down in our sequence, play around with it, get rid of the black, but also learn how to retime this stuff during our edits. So let's get started. So let's go down here and grab this big explosion there. That looks great. And we'll drop this down on our timeline. And we're going to keep the settings the same. And there we go. Now you'll notice that it's actually cropping out of the frame here, and that's just because all of these elements are shot in 4K. And the 4K is great because you can shrink down your images and it's going to look great on your 1080p timeline. So I have the two shots down on my timeline. We're going to click on the first one and we're going to go to the effect controls, and we want to go down to our scale here and we want to shrink this down. Next we want to click on this motion line, and what that allows us to do is to move this around the screen. You can also go up here to your X and Y axis and move it around, but I tend to like to click on my screen rather than doing that. We now have to get rid of the black. Now the best way to do this is use what's called a blend mode. What that means is that we're basically going to tell Premiere that we just want to take out the black, but we want to leave the midtones and the highlights there. So we're going to click on blend mode and go down to screen. And there you have it. One thing you'll find out is that it is also a little transparent when you use the blend mode. So you can also copy this and paste it and place it on top. And that definitely does help, and you can layer it a couple more times. That's how we kind of get it into our timeline. But now what I want to do is, since this is at 120 frames per second, I want to go in and start timing it to my scene a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to my effect controls, and I want to go to time remapping. And the first thing I want to do is I want this to go a little fast until this whole fireball just really catches up. And we're going to put a keyframe there, and it's going to go fast to here, and we're going to slow it back down. So the first thing we're going to do is on the first keyframe, you'll see this line. And this line basically is saying that it's going at 100 times per second. So it's going 100%, which is the normal speed that it's at currently. But we want to make that go a little faster. So let's take that line and move it up. Okay. So now it's going to go, that line here is going at 300. So let's bring it down to 300 here. Going normal motion, and then once it goes up there, we want it to speed back up to 300%. So you'll see we get this nice little graph here. Let's say we didn't want it to cut right here, because basically it's going 300% and then it goes back down to 100%. So if we grab the keyframe, it goes into two halves. So we can basically move it like this Move it out like that. And the same thing here. So we get this nice little curve here. So it's nice and slow during this whole section here, and then it kind of picks up later on. So I can even move this even closer this way. The one other thing you're probably looking at is that when we see this, you're going to see that we have this hard line down here. So the next thing we want to do is actually do some masking. So what we're going to do now is move over to After Effects, talk about masking, because it's much easier to do it over there. Welcome to the After Effects portion of this tutorial. And so we're just going to jump right in, and we're just going to open our After Effects here, and we have these two shots. So we have this explosion, and we have this hallway. And what we're going to do is we're going to composite some explosions in this hallway here. So the first thing, I'm just going to drag this hallway down to the composition button, and that opens it up here. Now what we're going to do is take this ground explosion and drop it on top. And we want to right click over here, transform, and fit to comp. Okay. So again, what we need to do is shrink this down, just move it over here. The one thing you'll notice is the blending mode is actually down here and not in the effect controls in After Effects. So let's drop that down and go to screen. And there we go. Now, like I mentioned in the previous tutorial, we are going to be talking a little bit about how to make this not as transparent, but we're not going to go into all the details with it. I'll show you a few tips and tricks on how to kind of punch that out a little bit more. So the first thing we want to do is we want to take this and we need to mask out this wall. So we're going to duplicate Command D, the layer underneath, and put that on top. And we're going to use the pen tool up here just to draw out this wall. So we'll click here, 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 and here, and close that. And now that layer here is going to be on top of the fire, so it won't interfere with that so much. So we're going to drop that down, drop down masks, and we're going to feather that maybe 5 pixels. Okay, perfect. And we'll just close that down. We don't need to touch that anymore. The next thing we need to do is start playing around with the masks on this layer here, because you'll notice that there's a flat line underneath it. It's really not looking super hot, but we can kind of move this around and get it positioned. So maybe we'll take this guy and the center of it and just put it down that hallway there. And the first thing I want to do is I'm going to turn off that top layer, and I'm going to use this guy right here, this rectangle tool. But I'm going to click and hold and select the ellipse tool. And I'm going to use a couple different masks to make this work. We just want to get rid of this bottom edge here because you can tell that that's been just placed in there. So we'll just click and drag this oval over top of it. And where we see masks, we want to drop down, instead of add, we want to subtract it. And you'll see we get this kind of edge there now, and we'll drop down masks, and we want to really feather that out. And we can kind of select this and maybe pull this down a little bit and kind of make it a bit of an odd shape, just so it looks a little bit more natural. Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's looking a lot better. Now let's turn that other side layer on. That's looking pretty good. But now we want to make this fire layer pop out a lot more. So let's just duplicate that. And now you can see that with it duplicated, it's definitely popping out a bit more. And there you have it. That's how you're going to composite fire into a lot of your compositions. And all we really have to do to make that transparency pop out a little bit more is give it some saturation, double up the layer a couple times, and try putting in some glow and some other filters in there too. For the next part of the tutorial, we're going to move over to Final Cut X, layer a number of explosions together to make some cool motion graphics. For the next part of the tutorial, we're going to be looking at Final Cut X and working with some explosions to create some cool motion graphics. So let's start by going over here to our new project. We're going to click on that and we're going to call this Graphics Explosions. Okay, so now what we want to do is we're going to grab these eyes up here and drag them down to our timeline. And right now we're going to choose 1080p and change this to 23.98. And that's good. We're going to hit OK. And so we have this here. And now the next thing we want to do is take our first explosion and just drop this down on our timeline. We're going to go and click on this one and we're going to put this down to 50%, just so it spans the entire clip. And we're going to click on this guy and we're going to, again, change this to multiply instead of going to screen. Now, the reason why I'm going to multiply instead of screen is that multiply will put this image inside the fire but leave the black alone, which is kind of what I want for this effect. And so we have that there. Now, the one problem is it's kind of obscured because we don't quite know what that is. So we're going to scale up and we're going to use our X and Y to kind of move this around. So that's looking pretty cool. Now, to make this a little bit easier for ourselves, I'm just going to highlight both of these, right click, and make this a new compound clip. I'm going to click on that, call this Fire Eyes. I'm going to go at the top here and go to my titles. We're going to grab this one called Trailer and drop that down there. Now, the problem with this is that we need to make sure that the background is checked off. So we actually have this title like that. And I can turn off these particles if I don't want them, but I'm okay with that. Maybe we'll call it Coming Soon. So I want to go to dissolves and I'm just going to put a cross dissolve on the end of that. And there you have it. That's how you make some motion graphics with some explosions and some basic titles. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. My name's Andrew, and if you have any questions, please contact the customer support, and I wish you all happy compositing.